25 years ago, an entire class of young students vanished during a field trip, disappearing without a trace and leaving their families devastated. Authorities suspected the male teacher who had disappeared with them was involved, but with no bodies found and few leads to follow, the investigation eventually went cold. Yet through all these years, one desperate mother never gave up hope, clinging to the small chance that her daughter was still out there somewhere. Then one day, while looking through old photographs, she noticed a crucial detail that everyone had overlooked, a detail that would change the entire case and shock everyone involved in ways no one could have imagined before. We dive into this shocking story. Let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Maria Santos woke up on the morning of October 15, 2024, with a heavy heart. The gray, cloudy sky outside her window mirrored her somber mood. She had been preparing herself for this day. But even so, the grief and heartache were overwhelming. It was exactly 25 years since her daughter Isabella had disappeared. Slowly, Maria rose from her bed and made her way to the dressing table. There, hanging on the mirror, was a close-up photo of Isabella in her school uniform. Maria gently took the photo in her hands, her eyes welling up with tears as she gazed at her daughter's smiling face. "Oh, Isabella," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. But Maria quickly took a deep breath, steeling herself against the wave of sorrow, threatening to engulf her. She had endured the worst of times over the past 25 years, and she knew she had to stay strong. After washing her face and getting dressed, Maria checked her phone. There was a text from her best friend, Carmen Rodriguez. "You're not alone in this, all of us still remember. If you need company, come over to my place anytime." Carmen was also a mother of one of the vanished children. Maria felt a small comfort knowing that she wasn't alone in her grief. She replied to Carmen's message, asking if it would be okay to come over. Now Carmen's response was immediate and welcoming. Before leaving, Maria went to the kitchen and gathered a few packets of chamomile tea and a jar of cookies from her collection. The thought of arriving empty-handed at her friend's house didn't sit well with her, even after all these years of friendship. As Maria stepped out of her house and began the short walk to Carmen's, she couldn't help but reflect on the loneliness she had experienced since losing her husband. Carmen had become one of the few people who truly understood her pain and had been there for her through the darkest times. The neighborhood was quiet as Maria made her way down the familiar streets. The houses looked much the same as they had 25 years ago, a stark contrast to how much her life had changed. As she approached Carmen's house, just a few blocks from her own, she saw the front door open before she even had a chance to knock. Carmen greeted her with a warm, understanding smile and enveloped her in a comforting hug. "Come in, Maria," she said softly, ushering Maria inside. Maria handed Carmen the cookie jar and tea packets as they made their way to the kitchen. Carmen busied herself with boiling water for the tea, while Maria settled onto the living room sofa. The familiar surroundings of Carmen's home provided a small measure of comfort on this difficult day. As they waited for the water to boil, Carmen turned to Maria and asked gently, "How are you doing?" Maria sighed, her eyes downcast. "I'm trying to keep up. You know how it is. This day is always the hardest." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Even though I've learned to live with it, the past still haunts me, especially today." Carmen nodded in understanding. "It's the same for me," she admitted. "Remember, I completed my therapy last year. While I've accepted the past and tried to rein in all the what-ifs that would eat me alive, I can't deny that this day is especially hard. I'm not sure if that means I need to go back to therapy." The kettle whistled, and Carmen poured the hot water into 2 cups, bringing them to the coffee table in front of the sofa. The comforting aroma of chamomile filled the air, providing a small moment of peace in the midst of their shared grief. As they sat together sipping their tea, Maria felt grateful for Carmen's presence. They had formed a bond through their shared tragedy, supporting each other through the years when it seemed like no one else could truly understand their pain. The weight of their loss hung heavy in the air, but there was also a sense of solidarity, a reminder that they were not alone in their grief. Carmen set her teacup down and turned to Maria with a gentle smile. "You know, my psychologist told me something that's been helpful," she said. "We should face our pain whenever it comes and accept it as part of ourselves, not try to hide or bypass it." Carmen paused, considering her next words carefully. "I was thinking maybe we could look at some photos together. You're up for it?" "Of course." Maria took another sip of her tea, letting the warm liquid soothe her. After a moment, she nodded. "I think that might be good," she said softly. Carmen stood up and walked to the TV cabinet, pulling out a photo album. She returned to the sofa and sat close to Maria, placing the album between them. As they began to flip through the pages, a flood of memories washed over them. The photos chronicled happier times, their children's first day of school, birthday parties, and family picnics. Maria and Carmen found themselves sharing stories and reminiscing about the past, their voices a mixture of laughter and tears. "Do you remember when Isabella and Diego first started at that school?" Maria asked, pointing to a picture of the two children in their uniforms. Carmen nodded, a wistful smile on her face. "Grade 4, wasn't it? The school had only been open for 2 years at that point." "That's right," Maria confirmed. "I remember how small the class was. At first just 7 students, but by the end of that year it had grown to 16. The school really put a lot of effort into marketing, didn't they?" Carmen mused. "All those discounted fees to attract parents." They continued to flip through the album. Maria's eye was suddenly drawn to a photo she had never seen before. It showed Isabella and Diego along with some of their classmates working on an art project during the school arts festival. The children's faces were alight with enthusiasm, completely unaware of the tragedy that would befall them. "This picture, it's beautiful," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where did you get it from?" Carmen looked at the photo and explained. "I received it from the police a few months ago. Since the case went cold, they allowed parents to collect copies of evidence materials. I went down to the station and requested everything they had." Maria was surprised. "I didn't know we could do that. If I had known, I would have asked for copies too." Carmen gave her a sad smile. "Maybe it's better that you didn't, to be honest. Having all this evidence, it's made it harder for me to move on. That's part of why I needed therapy. I spent so many sleepless nights poring over those files, looking for something, anything that might give us answers." As they continued to look through the photos, Maria came across another unfamiliar image. It was a class picture taken in front of a red school bus, the very bus that had taken the children on that fateful trip. Maria studied the photo intently, her eyes scanning each face. Suddenly she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. "Carmen," she said, her voice filled with confusion and a hint of hope. "Why is Headmaster Dr. Elena Vasquez in this picture? I thought Mr. Roberto Morales, the classroom teacher, went alone with the kids and just one support staff that day." Carmen leaned in to look at the photo more closely. "You know, I'm not entirely sure," she said, furrowing her brow. "I remember hearing rumors from some other parents that the staff member was actually the headmaster, but I never gave it much thought." Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. All these years, she had believed it was just the teacher and a volunteer or admin staff on that trip. The presence of the headmaster in this photo raised questions she had never considered before. As Maria opened her mouth to voice her concerns, Carmen gently placed a hand on her arm. "Maria," she said softly, "I know that look in your eyes. We've been down this road before, thinking we found something crucial, dozens if not hundreds of times. It's not good for us to cling to false hope." Maria wanted to argue, to insist that this detail could be important, but she saw the concern in Carmen's eyes. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the surge of emotions within her. "You're right," she said finally, though a part of her still clung to the nagging doubt. "It's probably nothing." Carmen gave her a sympathetic smile and turned back to the photo album. "Look," she said, pointing to the bus in the background. "This photo was most likely taken before the trip on school grounds. That would explain why the headmaster was there." Maria nodded, though not entirely convinced. She glanced at the clock on the wall and realized they had been talking for almost an hour. "Carmen, I hate to do this, but I should probably get going," she said, standing up. "I want to visit Isabella's grave, bring her some flowers, and tidy up a bit. I do it every year, you know." Carmen nodded in understanding. "Of course. Would you like some company? Diego's grave is in the same area." Maria appreciated the offer, but saw the hesitation in Carmen's eyes. "That's kind of you, but I know you prefer to go with Louise later. I'll be all right." As Maria prepared to leave, she paused and turned back to Carmen. "Would it be all right if I took that photo with me? The one with the school bus?" Carmen seemed to consider for a moment before nodding. "Of course. But Maria, promise me you won't let this consume you. We can't afford to go down that rabbit hole again." Maria assured her friend she would be careful, but as she left Carmen's house and made her way to the bus stop, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled upon something important. The image of Headmaster Dr. Elena Vasquez, standing with the children before their ill-fated trip, burned in her mind, a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit with the story she had been told for the past 25 years. As she waited for the bus that would take her to town to buy flowers from her local favorite florist, Maria found herself torn between the desire to uncover the truth and the fear of reopening old wounds. The sky above her grew darker, threatening rain, much like the storm of emotions brewing within her. She silently prayed that the rain would hold off until she had finished her visit to the cemetery, allowing her this one day to honor her daughter's memory in peace. Maria sat on the bus, lost in thought. As it made its way through the familiar streets towards the town center, she held the photo in her hands, unable to tear her eyes away from the image of her daughter and her classmates, frozen in time on that fateful day The more she studied the picture, the more questions arose in her mind. Carmen's words echoed in her head, warning her not to cling to false hope, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why had some parents believed the headmaster went on the trip while others, like herself, had been told it was just the teacher and a support staff? She prided herself on being an active and involved parent, attending all meetings and gatherings, even the school trials and hearings. When the victim's parents had sought justice in court, how could such a crucial detail have escaped her notice? Maria hesitated for a moment before pulling out her phone. She had the officer's personal number saved from long ago, but she wasn't sure if he would still remember her, or if he'd even want to talk. The thought made her stomach clench, but she was resolved to make the call anyway. She glanced around the nearly empty bus. The worn seats were speckled with faint graffiti, and the dim fluorescent lights flickered every now and then. Outside, the neighborhood blurred past. Taking a breath, she dialed the number, pressing the phone tightly against her ear. The first call went unanswered. She swallowed and tried again. Still nothing, just the mechanical drone of a voicemail prompt. Maria's fingers hovered over the screen, debating whether to leave a message. What would she even say? "Hi, it's been years, but I need your help. Do you remember me?" It felt foolish, desperate. She shook her head and ended the call without leaving a voicemail, slipping her phone back into her purse. The bus jerked slightly as it came to another stop. She glanced outside and suddenly felt a jolt of recognition. This was near the headmaster's house. The sight of the old neighborhood sent a chill through her stirring memories. She thought she had buried without fully thinking it through. She stood up just as the bus doors were about to close. She pressed the bell and stepped out, apologizing to the driver as she exited. Standing on the sidewalk, Maria suddenly felt foolish. She had no idea if the headmaster was home, or even if she still lived at the same address. After all these years, she vaguely remembered the street but couldn't recall the exact house number. Checking the bus timetable at the stop, she saw that the next bus wouldn't arrive for another 25 minutes. Well, she muttered to herself, I might as well try while I'm here. Maria began walking down the street, her eyes scanning the houses for anything familiar. The neighborhood had changed over the years, with some houses renovated and others showing signs of age. After several minutes of wandering, she found herself in front of a house that stirred a faint memory. She stood on the sidewalk studying the property. The garden was well maintained with neatly trimmed hedges and colorful flower beds. A car was parked in the driveway, but Maria couldn't be sure if it belonged to Master Vasquez or if she even still lived here. As she hesitated on the sidewalk, Maria realized that she had never truly spoken to Headmaster Vasquez outside of a few brief encounters. There was the day of the disappearance, when the headmaster had offered her condolences, and once when Maria had come with other parents to protest at her house. Here they had also exchanged words at the police station, years ago, but beyond that their interactions had been minimal, despite living in the same neighborhood. Taking a deep breath, Maria walked up to the porch and knocked on the door. She waited, her heart pounding, but there was no answer from inside. Just as she was about to turn and leave, feeling embarrassed by her impulsive decision, she noticed two women walking along the sidewalk. One of the women appeared to be in her mid-30s, while the other was older, closer to Maria's age, and as they turned onto the walkway leading to the house, their eyes met Maria's, and she immediately recognized the older woman as Headmaster Dr. Elena Vasquez, even though time had added lines to her face and softened the sharpness of her features. The headmaster didn't seem to recognize Maria at first, her expression polite but questioning. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice kind but cautious. Maria swallowed hard, suddenly feeling nervous. "I'm Maria Santos," she said, watching as recognition dawned on the headmaster's face. Headmaster Vasquez froze for a moment, her composure slipping as she began to stutter. "Oh, Mrs. Santos, please just give me a moment." She turned to the younger woman, ushering her towards the house. "Why don't you go inside and make yourself comfortable? I'll be right there." As the headmaster fumbled with her keys to unlock the door, Maria's mind raced. She knew the headmaster had no children, so who was this younger woman? Was she interrupting something important? Once the younger woman was inside, Headmaster Vasquez followed her inside. Maria saw as she switched on the lights of the house. Maria decided to approach closer to the doorway, waiting at the threshold. Maria debated whether she should call out or wait, but as the minutes stretched on, impatience crept in. The house was eerily quiet, except for the faintest murmur of voices in the distance. After a beat, she raised her hand and knocked again, despite the fact that the door was still slightly ajar. Footsteps. Then suddenly the door swung open wider. Elena reappeared in a rush, wiping her hands dry on the sides of her blouse, as if she had just finished washing them. "I'm so sorry for the wait," she said, forcing a small chuckle. She hesitated. Forgive me, but your name, it sounds familiar, but I can't quite place it. Maria inhaled deeply before answering. I'm Isabella Santos's mother, she said, watching the woman's reaction closely. My daughter was in the grade 4 class of 1999. She vanished during the school trip. The headmaster's face paled, and she struggled to maintain her smile. Maria couldn't help but notice how nervous she seemed, her eyes darting between Maria and the woman inside, through the barely opened door behind her. Maria caught sight of the woman standing inside the house. She wasn't part of the conversation yet. She lingered in the background as if she was watching, listening. Headmaster Vasquez cleared her throat, trying to regain her composure. Mrs. Santos, I'm no longer the school headmaster. You see, I took early retirement some years ago. May I ask why you're here? Maria paused for a moment before deciding to be direct. I have a question about the day of the school trip. I'm sorry for showing up unannounced. I was in the area when it came to mind, she said, keeping her voice steady despite the turmoil within her. I won't take much of your time, I promise. The headmaster glanced over her shoulder again at the woman inside, then back to Maria. All right, she said reluctantly, but I can't stay long. I have a guest waiting. Maria nodded in understanding and reached into her purse, pulling out the class photo. She held it up for Headmaster Vasquez to see this picture. Maria began. Was it taken at the school or during the trip? Headmaster Elena narrowed her eyes as she studied the photo for a moment. She seemed lost in thought. Her brow furrowed. I think it was during, she started, then quickly revised her statement. No, it was taken at the school parking lot. Maria's heart skipped a beat at the headmaster's hesitation. She pressed on. Were you on the trip that day? The headmaster's eyes widened slightly, and she shook her head. No, I stayed at the school. Mr. Morales, the classroom teacher, and a staff member from administration went on the trip. It was supposed to be me, but I had an important last-minute matter to attend to, so the admin took my place. Maria nodded slowly, processing this information. It aligned with what she had always believed, but something still felt off. She decided to ask one more question, hoping it wouldn't push too far. This might be my last question, if you don't mind. Did you notice anything suspicious about Mr. Morales that day? Anything at all? At this, Headmaster Vasquez's demeanor changed. Her voice took on an edge of annoyance as she replied, No. Mrs. Santos, I've given all these statements to the police countless times. I never would have thought Mr. Morales capable of something like this. She paused, her expression softening slightly. I would prefer not to speak about it anymore. It was heartbreaking for me too, and I found closure. I don't want to open old wounds again. Maria felt a pang of guilt at the headmaster's words. She hadn't meant to cause more pain. I'm sorry, she said softly. I understand truly. It's just I still can't believe my daughter just disappeared into thin air. To her surprise, Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know what I hoped, that maybe you'd have an answer after all this time. Maria reached into her purse and pulled out a pocket tissue, dabbing at her eyes. As her vision cleared, she noticed the younger woman inside watching them intently. There was a mix of curiosity and concern in her gaze, and Maria Headmaster Vasquez's expression softened further. I understand the pain, Mrs. Santos. It's one of the reasons I took early retirement. As long as I worked at that school, I could never overcome the grief. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and embraced Maria briefly. I know that today marks 25 years. You're not the first parent to come here on this day over the years. Maria was taken aback by the sudden show of emotion from the headmaster. She put the photo back into her purse as they parted. She managed a weak smile. Thank you for your time. I should go now. I'm sorry for taking up your afternoon. As Maria turned to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The headmaster's initial hesitation, the presence of the mysterious younger woman, and the subtle inconsistencies in her answers all gnawed at her mind. Yet she also knew that her suspicions might just be her overthinking. Everything Carmen was right. She couldn't afford to lose herself in false hope. Again, walking back towards the bus stop, Maria's mind raced with conflicting thoughts and emotions. The rain that had been threatening all day finally began to fall, matching her somber mood. As she reached the shelter of the bus stop, she pulled out her phone and stared at it, wondering if she should try to contact the police officer who had been assigned to the case once again. But before Maria could make up her mind, the bus arrived. She stepped on board and settled into a seat by the window. As the bus pulled away from the curb, she clutched the photo tightly to her chest. The rain continued to pour, a steady rhythm against the pavement outside. Though at least the wind had settled, Maria sat on the bus, her mind whirling with thoughts and questions. The encounter with Headmaster Vasquez had left her with more doubts than answers, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As the bus made its way through the rain-slicked streets, with a sigh she pulled out her phone, hoping for a notification, a missed call. Anything but the screen remained blank. No reply from the police officer. Maria's stop came into view, and she disembarked, stepping out into the light drizzle. The florist shop was just down the street, its colorful display of flowers a stark contrast to the gray day. As she approached, Maria paused under the awning of a nearby shop, hoping the rain would let up. There, in the wait, she hesitated, debating whether to call again. Would it make a difference after her conversation with the headmaster? She doubted she'd get anything new. The officer would probably just echo what she had already heard. With a quiet sigh, she slipped the phone back into her bag. Maybe Carmen was right. Maybe she was just reopening old wounds for nothing. But no matter how much she tried to push it aside, the image of the young woman in Headmaster Vasquez's house and the headmaster's nervous behavior kept nagging at her. Something about it didn't sit right. Deciding she had waited long enough, Maria took a deep breath and made a run for the florist shop, holding her purse over her head as a makeshift umbrella. The cold rain clung to her skin, seeping through the fabric of her clothes, but she barely noticed. She just had to cross the street, getting a little wet. Wouldn't matter. Reaching the shop, she pushed the door open and the soft chime of the bell overhead announced her arrival. The shift from the chilly rain to the warm, fragrant air inside was immediate. The scent of fresh flowers enveloped her, a soothing blend of roses and lilies. Mrs. Santos, the florist, said, recognizing her. "I was wondering if we'd see you today." Maria managed a small smile in return. "Hello, Sophia." "Yes, I'm here for my usual order." As Sophia began to gather the flowers Maria typically chose for Isabella's grave, Maria found herself scanning the shop's selection. The variety seemed less extensive than in previous years, and she couldn't help but feel a twinge of disappointment. Noticing Maria's expression, Sophia explained apologetically, "I'm sorry, we don't have as much variety this year. The weather's been unpredictable, and it's affected our suppliers." Maria nodded in understanding. "It's all right, Sophia. I'm sure we can still put together something beautiful for Isabella." As Sophia continued to gather flowers, the bell above the door chimed again. Maria turned to see Carmen and her husband Luis entering the shop. Their eyes met, and for a moment Maria saw surprise and then concern flash across Carmen's face. "Maria," Carmen said, approaching her friend, "I thought you'd have gone to the florist earlier. Is everything all right?" Maria hesitated, unsure how much to share about her impromptu visit to Headmaster Vasquez's house. "I got a bit sidetracked," she said finally, "but it's good to see you both again." Luis shook Maria's hand warmly. "It's good to see you too, Maria. How are you holding up?" Before Maria could answer, Sophia returned with an armful of flowers. "Here. You are Mrs. Santos. Would you like to arrange them yourself as usual?" Maria nodded, grateful for the distraction. "Yes, thank you, Sophia. I'll do that." As Maria began to arrange the flowers carefully, selecting each stem and placing it with care, Carmen and Luis chose their own bouquet for Diego's grave. The shop was quiet except for the soft rustling of paper and the occasional murmur of conversation between the couple. Maria found herself lost in thought as she worked, her hands moving almost of their own accord as she created a beautiful arrangement. The familiar task was soothing, allowing her mind to wander back to her encounter with Headmaster Vasquez. Should she tell Carmen about it? Would her friend understand her suspicions, or would she think Maria was grasping at straws again? As she finished tying a ribbon around the bouquet, Maria glanced up to see Carmen watching her with a mixture of affection and concern. "That's beautiful, Maria," Carmen said softly. "Isabella would have loved it." Maria felt tears prick at her eyes at the mention of her daughter's name. "Thank you," she managed to say. "I hope so." The three of them made their way to the counter to pay for their flowers. As Sophia wrapped Carmen's bouquet, Maria found herself studying her friend's face. There was a sadness there, a weight of grief that Maria recognized all too well. But there was also a calmness, a sense of acceptance that Maria envied. "Carmen," Maria said suddenly, her voice low, "there's something I need to tell you about today." Carmen turned to her, curiosity mingling with concern in her eyes. "What is it?" Maria took a deep breath, steeling herself. "After I left your house, I went to see Headmaster Vasquez." Carmen's eyes widened in surprise. "You did what?" Before Maria could explain, Sophia handed them their wrapped bouquets. "Here you are, ladies. I hope these bring you some comfort today." Maria and Carmen thanked her, and as they turned to leave the shop, Maria could feel the weight of Carmen's questioning gaze. She knew she owed her friend an explanation, but she wasn't sure how to put her suspicions into words without sounding like she was chasing ghosts. As they stepped out onto the sidewalk, the rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a fresh, clean scent in the air. Luis suggested they all go to the cemetery together, and Maria found herself nodding in agreement as they walked towards Luis's car. Maria knew she would have to share what she had learned, or what she thought she had learned, with Carmen. But as she clutched her bouquet of flowers, a small part of her wondered if she was ready to face the potential consequences of digging up the past once as they settled into Luis's car. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken questions. Carmen turned in her seat to face Maria, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Maria," she began gently, "why did you go to see Headmaster Vasquez? What were you hoping to find?" Maria took a deep breath, clutching the bouquet of flowers in her lap. She knew she had to choose her words carefully. "I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about that class photo. The one with the school bus." Carmen's brow furrowed. "The one we looked at earlier. What about it?" "I asked her about it, and she said it was taken at the school before the trip. But Carmen, at first she said it was during. Then she quickly corrected herself and said it was before. Don't you find that strange? It felt like she was hiding something." Maria explained, her voice growing more animated, the weight of suspicion pressing harder on her chest. Luis glanced at Maria in the rearview mirror, his expression neutral. "Maria, it's been 25 years. Memory can play tricks on us, especially with such a traumatic event." Maria nodded, acknowledging his point. I know, but there was something else. When I arrived at her house, there was a young woman there, someone I'd never seen before. And the headmaster, she seemed nervous, like she didn't want that woman to know what we were talking about." Carmen and Luis exchanged a look that Maria couldn't quite decipher after a moment of silence. Carmen spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "Maria, I understand the need to find answers. Believe me, I do, but we've been down this road before. Remember 3 years ago when you thought you'd found a connection between the bus driver and that cold case in Nevada?" Maria felt a flush of embarrassment at the memory. She had spent weeks convinced she'd uncovered a vital clue, only to have it lead nowhere. "This is different," she insisted, though a small part of her wondered if she was trying to convince herself as much as her friends. The car fell silent as they drove through the familiar streets towards the cemetery. Maria stared out the window, watching as the town gave way to more rural surroundings. The sky was clearing, patches of blue appearing between the clouds. As they approached the cemetery gates, Luis broke the silence. "Maria, we care about you. We don't want to see you get hurt again by false hope." Maria nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. "I know," she said softly. I can't help the feelings. Isabella and Diego and all the others deserve more than just acceptance. They deserve the truth." Carmen reached back and squeezed Maria's hand. "They do," she agreed, "but sometimes the truth is that we may never know everything, and that's something we have to learn to live with." As Luis parked the car, Maria felt a mix of emotions washing over her. The familiar grief, the persistent hope, and now a new feeling of determination. She knew her friends meant well, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her encounter with Headmaster Vasquez had opened a door that had long been closed. They stepped out into the cool, damp air, the scent of freshly turned earth lingering as they made their way through the cemetery. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a quiet, almost eerie stillness. Their footsteps were muffled by the soft ground as they walked toward Isabella and Diego's graves. Close, though not side by side, but still near enough that Carmen and Maria had arranged them together. A small comfort in their shared grief. Maria approached Isabella's tombstone first, her heart heavy as she knelt down, placing the bouquet of flowers gently at its base. The petals, still fresh with morning dew, added a small burst of color against the gray stone. She ran her fingers over the engraved name, tracing each letter as if memorizing it all over again. It always tore at her heart that this tombstone marked an empty grave, no body beneath it, no real closure. They had needed somewhere to direct their grief, somewhere tangible to visit. But the absence of Isabella's remains haunted her. This stone monument was both a comfort and a cruel reminder of all they didn't know. With a quiet sigh, she reached into her purse, pulling out the worn photograph. She held it up, studying her daughter's face, her fingers absent-mindedly brushing over the image. The ache in her chest deepened as memories flooded back. Isabella's laughter, the way she used to tug at her sleeve when she wanted attention the last time Maria had kissed her goodbye. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over as she let herself grieve the pain, as raw as the day it all happened. She didn't try to stop the sobs this time, letting them come freely. After a while, when the weight of her sorrow eased, just enough to breathe, Maria wiped her tears and slowly stood. She turned, glancing toward Carmen and Luis, who stood by Diego's grave, a few feet away, her own expression lost in quiet mourning. Maria took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to join her. But just as Maria was about to approach Carmen, something caught her eye. Maria stopped in her tracks in the distance near the plot where most of the children from the school were buried. She saw a familiar figure. It was the young woman from Headmaster Vasquez's house. She wasn't just passing through, she was standing still, staring down at a headstone, her hands clasped together as if in quiet contemplation. Maria's pulse quickened. Was this just a coincidence? Or was there something more to it? Setting her grief aside for the moment, Maria observed the woman. She stood within the section of the cemetery where most of the missing school children had been laid to rest. Many families had chosen this burial ground. It was the only proper cemetery not too far away. The neighborhood. Maria's heart began to race without a second thought. She turned in the other direction, gently patting Carmen's arm. She murmured, "I'll be right back," her voice barely above a whisper, before Carmen or Louise could say anything. Maria was already walking briskly towards the young woman as she approached. She could see that the woman was crying, her shoulders shaking, as she stood in front of one of the graves. "Excuse me," Maria called out softly, not wanting to startle her. The woman turned, surprise and fear flashing across her face as she recognized Maria. She quickly wiped her tears away, as if trying to compose herself. "We meet again," Maria continued, her gaze steady. "I think I saw you at Headmaster Elena's house earlier." The woman lowered her eyes, shifting uncomfortably. She looked as though she wanted to retreat, as if Maria's presence was making her feel exposed. "I'm sorry," Maria added quickly. "I don't mean to intrude." The woman exhaled softly, then shook her head. "It's okay," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "I come here every year on this day to grieve." Maria nodded in understanding. "So do I. Though I usually visit early in the morning, but today I was late." She glanced at her watch, 4 p.m. A silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Then Maria gently asked, "Who are you grieving for? Were you related to one of the students who went missing 25 years ago?" The woman hesitated, her lips parting slightly before pressing together again. For a moment she seemed to consider her response, then gave a slow, almost reluctant nod. Maria sensed her unease and didn't press further. But as her eyes drifted toward the tombstone, she noticed a small framed photograph placed near the grave. The image was blurred by age clinging to the glass, but Maria could make out the outline of a young girl's face. The woman followed Maria's gaze, and as if realizing what she was looking at, swiftly reached down and picked up the photograph, clutching it tightly to her chest. "I'm sorry," Maria said softly. "I didn't mean to invade your privacy." She met the woman's eyes, her own filled with understanding. "You must have really loved and missed your sister. I understand that feeling." Maria took a step back, preparing to leave, not wanting to cause the woman more distress. But just as she turned, the woman called out, her voice uncertain but firm. "Wait," she said. Maria paused, looking back. "Why did you go to Headmaster Elena's house earlier?" The unexpected question caught Maria off guard. She turned fully to face the woman, studying her expression. There was something more than curiosity in her eyes, something deeper, something cautious. "I was just asking about the day of the school trip," Maria admitted. "I wanted to know if she was there when the students left, or if she went with them." Reaching into her purse, Maria pulled out the now slightly crinkled photograph Carmen had shown her. She extended it toward the woman. "My friend Carmen over there." Maria gestured toward Carmen and Luis, who were still standing by Diego's grave. "She showed me this photo earlier. I had never seen it before, and it confused me. I didn't remember Headmaster Elena being there that day." The woman stared at the picture, her grip tightening on her own framed photograph. Maria sighed, shaking her head slightly. Headmaster Elena confirmed that this picture was taken in the school parking lot before the trip, but she trailed off, unsure how to finish the thought. The woman stared at the photograph, her expression shifting as she took in the faces of the children. A chuckle escaped her lips, light yet laced with sorrow. But then, as her gaze lingered on one face in particular, tears slipped down her cheeks. The words came out in a hushed whisper, tinged with affection and heartache. Isabella was such an angel. Her tone was not one of hatred, rather, it held a bittersweet warmth that tugged at Maria's heart. Maria's ears perked up at the name. "Did you know Isabella?" she asked, unable to hide the urgency in her voice. The woman seemed startled, as if she hadn't expected anyone to catch her words. She returned the class picture to Maria, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm Isabella's mother," Maria said, her voice steady, despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "Do you know something about Isabella?" The woman froze, her posture suddenly defensive, as if Maria had cornered her. Confusion washed over Maria as she noticed the woman's eyes dart toward the framed photograph. She still clutched against her chest. The resemblance between the woman and the girl in the frame was striking, and it sent a shiver down Maria's spine. "Who are you?" Maria asked slowly, her tone measured. "Are you this girl?" She pointed to the photo, her heart racing. The woman's response was immediate and vehement. "No," she shouted, but the fear in her voice suggested otherwise, as if she was trying to mask a deeper truth. "It's okay." Maria said softly, stepping closer. You don't need to be scared. Are you one of the survivors? This girl, the woman, shook her head quickly, panic flashing in her eyes, but the speed of her denial only reinforced Maria's suspicions. It felt like another lie. I think you're mistaken. That's not me. The woman insisted, but Maria could see the conflict in her gaze. No, Maria replied, her voice firm, yet compassionate. You know it is you. It's 100% you. The woman's shoulders sagged, and she looked defeated. You don't want to know who I am, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. It's better for everyone involved, please. Maria pleaded, desperation creeping into her words. For all these years, I've never been able to understand my daughter's disappearance. It's been eating me alive. I come here every year to honor her, and after a few months the pain in my heart eases. But then this day comes around, and it's like the devil's cycle, an endless torment on my soul. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stepped closer, her heart aching for answers. If you know anything, please tell me. The woman's eyes flickered with emotion, and Maria pressed on, her voice growing steadier. Why were you at Headmaster Elena's house earlier? You can't be her daughter. I know Elena doesn't have a daughter. The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. The woman's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment it felt like the world had paused, both of them, caught in a web of secrets and unspeakable truths. After a heavy pause, the woman finally relented, her voice barely above a whisper. You're right. I am one of the missing students, a survivor. Maria's heart raced, disbelief washing over her. What she gasped, struggling to process the weight of the woman's words. Who, but when the woman confirmed, my name is Sofia Herrera, recognition flooded over Maria. Sofia's name had been etched into the tombstone she had seen during countless visits, a haunting reminder of the tragedy. You were in my daughter's class, Maria murmured, trying to keep her reaction in check. Did your family know you were alive? Sofia shook her head, her expression heavy with pain. No, that's why I come to the grave later in the day. My parents always come in the morning. Maria nodded, recalling the times she had seen Sofia's parents at the cemetery. Always at that same hour, their faces etched with grief. Why didn't you come back home? She asked gently, not wanting to pry, but unable to contain her curiosity. I'm too broken, Sofia replied, her voice trembling. It's a long story. Maria's heart ached for the young woman before her, burdened by a past she couldn't escape. You don't have to share it all with me, she said softly. But please, please, I'm begging you, turn yourself into the police. Give them your testimony and evidence. Sofia shook her head vehemently. No, no, no. The headmaster said, I'd only hurt everyone, dozens of families. Shock raced through Maria at the mention of Headmaster Elena. Elena Vasquez knew you were alive all this time, and she discouraged you. Maria could hardly believe it. Why would she do that? I trusted her, Sofia confessed, her voice cracking. She was the only one who understood my pain. Maria felt a surge of emotion. Sofia, pain is living in the unknown, and we're all already in pain. It couldn't get any worse than this, she added. But your testimony, it could help us. You would be saving us all, providing us closure by revealing the truth. Sofia looked up, her eyes searching Maria for sincerity. Really? Maria nodded fervently, her heart aching for both the women's lost children. Yes, you'd be helping the victims' families. Please, Sofia. After a prolonged silence, the impact of Maria's words started to sink in with shaking hands. Sofia took a deep breath and reached for her phone. I think you're right. I've wrestled with this decision for a long time. But Elena always discouraged me, and I believed she had her reasons. But seeing you here now, I'll call the police, she said, her voice gaining strength. As they waited for the officer to arrive, Maria's mind raced, desperation clawed at her throat. Sofia, please, do you know where my daughter Isabella is? Sofia's expression shifted to one of sadness. She nodded slowly, her gaze heavy with unspoken sorrow. What do you mean? Maria pressed, her heart pounding in her chest. Where is she? Just then, Carmen and Luis approached, their eyes scanning the area for Maria. The tension thickened as Sofia's fear intensified, the realization that another victim's family was near, filling her with dread. Maria, what's going on? Carmen asked, looking between her friend and the stranger. Who is this? Maria took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Carmen, Luis. This is Sofia Herrera. She was on the bus that day. She's alive. Just as Sofia opened her mouth to respond, the distant wail of police sirens pierced the air. The sound seemed to freeze the moment, and Sofia instinctively flinched, her instincts urging her to flee. But Maria's voice broke through the chaos. Sofia, if you love Isabella and Diego, you owe it to them to tell the truth. She called, her tone firm, yet compassionate. Sofia paused, her feet rooted in place as she turned to face Maria Carmen and Luis. She saw the confusion etched on their faces and the desperation in Maria's eyes, which felt like a lifeline amidst her turmoil. "Okay," Sofia finally said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'll talk." But at the station just then, 2 police officers arrived, their presence adding an air of urgency to the scene. They approached Sofia, confirming if she was the one who had called. "What's your name?" one of the officers asked. "Sofia Herrera. I'm one of the survivors of the missing children from 25 years ago," she stated, her voice growing steadier as she spoke the words that had been trapped inside her for so long. The officers exchanged glances before one of them radioed the station requesting a system check on her name. While they waited for confirmation, the officers turned to the small group gathered in the cemetery. "We need everyone to come with us to the station. We can't have any disturbances here," one officer said firmly. Sofia nodded, her face pale but determined, and she followed the officers to their squad car. Maria walked alongside Carmen and Luis as they made their way to their own car, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Once inside, Laura couldn't hold back. "You won't believe what just happened," she began, her voice shaking with disbelief. She recounted everything to Carmen and Luis, the revelation about Sofia, the headmaster's knowledge of a survivor, and how it all felt like a sinister puzzle with missing pieces. Luis frowned, furrowing his brow. "This is all so strange. Why would the headmaster keep something like that from us?" "I don't know," Maria admitted, "but it feels like there's something deeper at play. Whatever truth Sofia holds, it must be significant enough that it could put Elena in danger." As they arrived at the police station, the trio stepped inside, the atmosphere tense with uncertainty. Maria spotted Officer Detective Rodriguez, the same officer she had tried to reach before he looked up from his paperwork, and immediately approached them. "I'm sorry. I couldn't take your call earlier. I was tied up with an urgent case," he explained, his voice apologetic. Maria felt a mix of frustration and urgency. "Officer, you need to take this seriously. Sofia has confessed that she's a survivor. She's finally ready to talk," she insisted, her heart racing. "If that's true, we'll reopen the case." Detective Rodriguez replied, his demeanor shifting to one of focus. He motioned for Sofia to follow him into an interview room, leaving Maria, Carmen, and Luis waiting anxiously in the sterile waiting area. As the door closed behind Sofia, Maria felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. She could only pray that Sofia would summon the courage to speak the truth, that this moment would finally bring some answers and perhaps some closure to all the families affected by the tragedy. Not long after Sofia was led into the interrogation room, Maria, Carmen, and Luis began to notice movement throughout the police station. Officers bustled around, their voices rising in urgency as they received orders. The air was thick with anticipation as they overheard commands being shouted. A unit was dispatched to Headmaster Elena's house with an arrest notice. Hope flickered in Maria's chest, and she exchanged glances with Carmen and Luis. This was it. Sofia must have shared everything she knew with the officers. Just then, the sharp sound of police sirens sliced through the air as the unit departed, and the tension in the room grew palpable. Less than an hour later, the anticipation turned into reality as the officers returned, leading a handcuffed headmaster, Elena, into the police station. She walked with her head down, the weight of her circumstances evident in her slumped shoulders. "I'm sorry," she mumbled as she locked eyes with Maria, Carmen, and Luis, her voice barely above a whisper, but the officers pushed her forward with unwavering authority, guiding her toward the booking area. Hours crawled by as Maria, Carmen, and Luis sat in anxious silence, each lost in their thoughts about what had just unfolded. Then they saw an officer enter the room where Sofia was being questioned. Maria leaned in close, straining to catch snippets of the muffled conversation she heard. The officer mentioned something about Elena Vasquez's statement being ready, and that she had confessed the whole truth. Before long, the officer emerged from the room and beckoned Maria, Carmen, and Luis to join him. Their hearts raced as they followed him into the interrogation room, where Sofia sat, her expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. Inside, the atmosphere felt charged with urgency. The officer wasted no time in laying out the details of the case. "Headmaster Vasquez has confessed during her interrogation," he began, his voice steady but somber. "She was the one who organized the entire class trip. She framed the teacher, Mr. Morales, to take the fall for what happened. She was under immense pressure. She had debts she couldn't pay, and the loan sharks turned out to be dangerous. They threatened her family." Maria's breath caught in her throat as the officer continued. The trip that was meant to be for Mesa Verde National Park was sabotaged. It appears that Headmaster Vasquez conspired with the kidnappers, resulting in the driver's death. The body couldn't be found, as you already know in our initial investigation. Then they abducted the teacher and the children, transporting them to a border area in Mexico where all the kids were trafficked and smuggled into another country. They were forced into organ trafficking. Maria's heart sank as the officer hesitated, a grim look crossing his face. This may be hard to hear, but I need to tell you the whole truth. The female students were targeted for various forms of exploitation by Mexican gangsters in Mexico. The male students, he paused, swallowing hard. They were sold overseas for child labor. The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Maria felt her stomach twist in knots as the horrifying reality of the situation sank in. She glanced at Carmen and Luis, who looked equally stunned, their faces pale as they processed the terrible revelation. Sophia sat in the room, her eyes cast downward, as she suddenly spoke up to Maria and Carmen. "I was the only one who made it out alive," she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of memories. 12 years ago, I managed to escape from the man who had purchased me and forced me into exploitation. Even after getting away, I was too traumatized and mentally destroyed to face my parents." Her gaze flickered to Maria and Luis, a mix of shame and pain etched on her face. "That's when I somehow connected with Headmaster Vasquez. She helped me build a new life, paid for my apartment, and covered my living expenses. But in return, I couldn't tell anyone the truth. She said it would only add to the distress of the victims' families." Maria's heart raced as she processed Sophia's words. She couldn't fathom the emotional manipulation that had kept Sophia silent for so long. "What about the other children? Did anyone else survive? My Isabella," she asked, desperation creeping into her tone. Sophia shook her head slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I honestly don't know about the others. We were mostly split up, but I remember Isabella and Diego didn't make it. Isabella, she died the day of the kidnapping from an overdose they gave her. Diego was next. They didn't get the dosage right for him either." At those words, Maria and Carmen broke down in tears, their grief crashing over them like a tidal wave. Sophia felt a pang of guilt, her heart aching for the pain she had unwittingly stirred. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, her voice cracking. "This is what I feared the most. Headmaster Elena was right." But Maria, wiping away her tears, shook her head firmly. "You did the right thing. Sophia, this is painful, yes, but we finally have closure. We can start healing now. The police, having listened intently, spoke up with this new evidence. We can reopen the case. Thanks to you, Sophia, we might be able to locate some of the other students." Maria felt her heart racing. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're reopening the case right away. We're in the process of filing charges against Elena Vasquez and have already contacted authorities in Mexico to pursue this new information. Sophia, we recognize the immense trauma you've endured, and we won't hold you accountable for withholding information. However, we are offering you witness protection as it's essential now that the investigation into the trafficking ring begins. We anticipate that they may attempt to locate you again." The officer paused, his expression softening, as he looked at Maria Carmen and Luis de Sino. "This must be incredibly difficult for you to have hope rekindled after all these years," only to he trailed off, unable to find the right words. And Maria nodded, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. "At least now we know," she said softly. "After all these years, we finally know what happened to our children. The other victims' families deserve to know about this too." The police assured everyone that they would reach out to the families of the other victims, now that the case was being reopened. As they prepared to leave the station, Sophia emerged from the interview room. She looked exhausted, her face pale and drawn, but there was a lightness to her that hadn't been there before, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Thank you," she said to Maria, her voice thick with emotion, "for believing me, for helping me find the courage to come forward." Maria embraced her feeling, a connection to this young woman who had survived unimaginable horrors. "Thank you for telling the truth," she whispered. "You've given us all a chance at closure." As Maria, Carmen, and Luis stepped out of the police station into the fading light of day, Maria felt a strange mixture of emotions. There was grief, of course, a fresh wave of sorrow for the daughter she had lost. But there was also a sense of peace, of a chapter finally closing after being left open for far too long. She looked at Carmen, and Luis saw the same complex emotions reflected in their eyes. They had lived with uncertainty for 25 years, and while the truth was painful, it was also in its own way a relief. "What now?" Carmen asked softly as they stood in the parking lot, the weight of the day's events heavy upon them. Maria took a deep breath, looking up at the sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. "Now," she said, her voice steady, "we honor our children's memory by making sure justice is served, and we help Sophia build a new life, the life she was denied for so long. As they made their way home, Maria felt a shift within herself. The grief was still there, a constant companion after all these years, but alongside it now was a sense of purpose, a determination to see this through to the end, for Isabella, for Diego, for all the children lost that day, and for Sofia, who had survived against all odds. Maria silently vowed to keep fighting until the full truth was known and those responsible were held accountable. The road ahead would be long and undoubtedly painful, but for the first time in 25 years, Maria felt like she was finally on the path to answers and perhaps eventually to a kind of peace she had thought forever out of reach. The investigation into the trafficking ring would continue for months to come, as authorities in both countries worked together to track down those responsible and search for any other survivors. The headmaster, Elena Vasquez, was sentenced to life in prison for her role in organizing the kidnapping and trafficking of the children. Her confession opened up new leads that investigators had never considered before. Sofia entered witness protection, but remained in contact with Maria and the other families through secure channels. She began therapy to deal with the trauma she had endured, and slowly started to rebuild her life with the support of people who understood her pain. The foundation that grew from this tragedy would go on to help other survivors of trafficking and provide resources for families dealing with missing children. Maria found that knowing the truth about Isabella's fate, while heartbreaking, also brought a sense of closure. She had been searching for all these years. She could finally properly grieve for her daughter and begin to heal from the wound that had never quite closed. The empty grave was filled in a small ceremony, and Isabella was finally laid to rest in the hearts and minds of those who loved her. The other families affected by the tragedy were contacted and given the same difficult truth that Maria and Carmen had received. While the news was devastating, it also provided them with the closure they had been seeking for over 2 decades. Some families found comfort in finally knowing what had happened to their children, while others struggled with the graphic details of their children's final days. But all of them agreed that Sofia had done the right thing in coming forward. Her courage in speaking the truth had not only brought justice for the victims, but had also prevented other children from potentially suffering the same fate. The trafficking ring was eventually dismantled thanks to the information she provided, saving countless other young lives. Years later, Maria would look back on that day at the cemetery as the moment everything changed. The moment when a chance encounter with a survivor brought truth to light. After 25 years of darkness, she never stopped missing Isabella, but she found peace in knowing that her daughter's story had finally been told and that justice had been served for all the children who were lost that day.